As the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United, Allina Health is focused on keeping our Loons in top condition. And with expertise in orthopedics, sports medicine, heart care, and more, Allina has the team to keep your family in the game too. The experts at Allina Health take the time to get to know you as a whole person, helping you achieve wellness for your mind, body, and spirit. It's an altogether better kind of healthcare. Learn more at allinahealth.org. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sound of the Loons. And this time we get to be joined by Manny Lagos, who I feel like every time I have you on, Manny, I'm like, wait, I got to double check and look, what is your title right now? Because first of all, I just get it screwed up every time. But now it's changed once again, which is truly why I think I've called you the Renaissance Man several times. Because if you think about your history with Minnesota soccer, whether it was as a player and then going on to Minnesota United, to Minnesota Thunder, to coach, to GM, I mean, you've literally done it every aspect in the state of Minnesota. So now another new title for you, but I want to talk about what that title means, how it came to be, and how you're feeling about it, as now you're going to be the club's first ever chief development officer and also serve as a technical advisor for Minnesota United. So in your mind, what does that mean for you, and how does that sort of manifest itself?
Yeah, I think, personally and professionally, I'm incredibly excited. I think looking at the journey of the club and the accomplishment we had, both as a player, as a coach, and obviously as a GM, I'm very proud. I also think, we're at a point where we made some big changes and we have an opportunity to think about how we want to take the club and grow the club. And certainly, on a personal level, I think there is some, a model here where, looking at kind of the needs of how our model was the last couple of years, I think there's an opportunity for me to help in a way that we can bring in new leadership, both somebody who had kind of been in my role, but it was a little bit nuanced because we really had Adrian kind of in the player decision role. So it was a little bit, kind of chunky, whereas I think now we're going to create some clear roles for people in these spaces that I'm excited about. And one is obviously a new sporting director, CSO, and the other one is a new head coach. And I think, again, as a club, you're going to always evolve. You're going to evolve because this league is growing, because it's getting more competitive. We're going to evolve because the league is getting bigger, because our club is getting bigger. We have a second team. We have an academy. And ultimately, we should always be thinking about how are we going to be competitive on the field, and how are we going to grow. And we had to make some big decisions this year. And I think on that big picture level, I'm excited for the club. I'm excited now professionally because the club has amazingly asked me to take a role that kind of has three different channels. I think the one is to still stay connected in the sporting area, both on a senior technical advisor role. So it does kind of put me in a place where hopefully I can take my gray hair and decades of value in terms of being in soccer and continue to help us solve big picture things, i.e., obviously, not only, being involved in getting the right type of leaders in, but also making sure that we have leaders that line up with the principles and values of the club, and then line up with the goals and the realities of how we're going to strategize about how to build a great club that's competitive year in, year out. And frankly, build a club that when we have a dip like this year, where we're incredibly disappointed, we have the right staff to think and plan to get better again for the good of soccer in Minnesota and good for our 20,000 people that show up and cheer on Minnesota United week in and week out. So that channel I'm still very excited about. I'm excited to kind of be involved in making sure the identity of the club is aligned with the leadership that we're trying to grow. The other two areas, one is in the business development side and the other is in community relations side. I'm excited because that's a little bit taken out of my comfort zone of thinking about the bigger picture is we do have to grow this club. We have to build our brand. There's no doubt that we have an amazing brand, that we have 20,000 fans, and we've got a great brand to build from. But it needs to be built. Ultimately, the soccer business is not just the winning on the field, which is massively important to the success off the field, but it also means off the field, we have to be pushing ourselves through reality that we're still not, maybe say, one of the top 5 leagues in the world, and we're still not as relevant within the country the way we want to be, or the way soccer in Minnesota United needs to be. So I'm excited on those 2 channels of being involved with the club and trying to see how those integrate with the sporting side. And they have to integrate for this to be successful.
Well, and based on that, just listening to you talk about it, I mean, we know that from the soccer perspective, like the prowess that you have and the history that you have in the state of Minnesota as a player and as a coach and as a GM, and you were the first ever sporting director for Minnesota United. If you think back all the way back to 2016, when the club got announced to go to MLS, and then you sort of changed to that chief soccer officer role, but now being able to really still be able to have clearly a hand in that, in the conversations about the soccer piece. But the community aspect, which I thought was like, when I read that in the press release, I'm like, you get pulled into every single community aspect anyway, right? I mean, people think like if anybody in the club needs something where they need you to be, on the field at Allianz, they need you to be at an event, they need you to be out front, like whether it's at NSC hosting people, corporate or smaller groups, Special Olympics, like you name it, like you're pulled into that because everyone thinks Minnesota soccer, Manny Lagos or Lagos family. So that seemed like an easy peasy fit. So to point out the business aspect and still growing this sport in not just this country, but in Minnesota, what kind of meetings will you have to be involved in at that point? I mean, then you're going to be pulled into a lot more additional things. And how do you divide that time and prioritize?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, my brain have like a third. And to be honest, they're all integrated. I think the next phase of clubs in MLS, and particularly for Minnesota United, is for us to understand that the club is one club. All of these things are interconnected. They all have an influence in terms of how we build out and how we become competitive in a crazy competitive league in MLS. So to me, the integration of the business model with the sporting model, with the short and long-term planning for both how we're going to be competitive on the first team and how we're going to kind of think about how to create the most competitive way to do a second team and academy, all those things that we're still at the early stages of a club and what our identity is going to be. And I think for me, that is really exciting because we really do have some great things we've done as a club, both on and off the field. And we really need to continue to think about how we're going to use these measurements and integration to build the identity of this club to be successful. And ultimately, it's about being successful and winning on the field. So when I talk about being successful, it's all about making sure that our goal is to win trophies, to lift trophies for our fans from Minnesota. But it's more complex than just say, the sporting department, or it's more complex than just say, if the club can try to figure out a way to kind of create a great business model. All of those things have to be integrated. They have to grow together. They have to kind of have an understanding that, the identity of the club is everybody has a purpose to come here every day and work for the club because it does mean something. It does matter. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited that, that type of comfort zone for me is going to be different. You mentioned it. I've been GM or head coach since 2009 for the club. And this is a little bit different way to kind of hopefully lead and help the club continue to have a great trajectory, which when I do these podcasts, it's surreal. I can't believe, the growth of the sport, the belief from Minnesotans, the belief of the fans, the successes we've had on and off the field. Again, I think the last couple of years I would have hoped for a little bit more success, but still amazing. And that's exciting.
Well, and when you look at that, and I just want to talk about using that breadth of knowledge that you have, and you just said it, since 2009, in some way, shape, or form, you've been in a position on the sporting side that has an influence on decisions, building what's the product on the field, whatever it might be. And now there's this in between time. And I think a lot of people that are going to be watching and listening to this podcast are wondering what is happening now. You know, we had Sherry Ballard on, the CEO, last week in the podcast, and she talked from that perspective. But what is your role in this moment at this time? How are decisions being made? And I just want to preface it in a not the same but different manner. We talked to Josh Wolf a lot, right, during the season, and he was frustrated on some of the lack of decisions that got to be made, or the timing of them, because of everything that was going on with their situation with Claudio Reyna and how that affected some of the sporting decisions that they could make. You have a clear-cut opportunity here in your role to navigate contract decisions. I mean, I don't even know what all is happening in Minnesota United right now, but who is navigating that? How is that being navigated and handled? I think that's what the fans want to know as well.
Sure. I mean, I feel very comfortable talking about where we are. You know, right now I'm in an interim CSO position. We have an interim head coach in Sean McCulley, and we have an interim technical director in Hank Stebbins, as kind of the three that we're truly trying to navigate. We have a great sporting staff. We have a scouting staff, data analytics staff. We have people here that are behind the scenes working very hard to do as much as we can in this transition time to make sure two things happen. We run the club in a day-to-day way that the expectation of the club is the most important thing. So I think everybody here understands that. I think there's a process here that's very collaborative, and I think it lines up with the type of leadership we're trying to hire. So I don't think there'll be any, there's challenges and adversity in this situation, no doubt, but I think we're getting through it the best we can, and I think it's in a positive way for the good of the club. I would say that that also lines up with the principles and values, that Sherry and I have talked about in terms of who we want to hire and why we want to get the quality leadership we want. And the principles and values of the type of people who are excited to be collaborative and push this club forward to its next iteration of making sure we're aspirational competitive. Our expectation is to build championship teams. And so to me, all those things are happening in the short term. Yeah, we have to deal with the day-to-day model. And, we have a staff here. And again, I'm here to do that until our new leadership gets in place. And we're working on that timeline aggressively right now. I think over the next little bit here, we'll have some great announcements that'll really start to put a direction where this club can really, get people excited about where we're going.
When we asked Sherry last week, sort of checking boxes on what are the qualities that are being looked at and looked for in the decisions being made going forward. And I know that was a collaborative effort. When you look at some of those boxes that you wanted to check, or maybe some qualities or things like that, what were some of the boxes when you guys had these meetings and you had your input and others had their input on like what you were looking for in qualities and going forward?
Yeah, I think it's really important that you have somebody who really is excited to aspirationally push the club in a direction that the expectation is to win and win championships, and has a vision and a story behind how they're going to accomplish that. That is, somewhat indicative of who we are as a club as well. And the realities of these amazing and positive things, like 20,000 people showing up every game, like up until last year, our home dominance, like the expectation that, we should be building teams that should be making runs deep in the playoffs, like the expectation that we should have a culture and environment where the coaching staff and the technical staff are very aligned on what we're doing and why we're doing it. And they're very aligned on the identity and style that will play both on the field and how we recruit players. And so I think the opportunity to find leadership that embraces those values, which I think are both indicative of Minnesota United as a club, but even more importantly, I think they're indicative of Minnesota in general. So to me, I'm really excited about the process we're going through and where the club is heading in terms of that direction.
What I think, it's one of those things, having been a Minnesota soccer fan my whole life as well, and being through all these iterations. And you just said, I can't believe I'm sitting here every time we do one of these podcasts. And it's like every time you go to Allianz Field, it's like, holy cow, I can't believe this is in Minnesota. And it still feels like pinch me moments when you see the progress and the process that Minnesota soccer has gone through. And you kind of want someone that, even though if they may come from outside, that they embody that same sort of like feeling and passion for that Minnesota soccer community. And at the same time, putting the best product with the best culture and the best vibe and energy onto the pitch, kind of embodying all that. You want someone to feel what you feel when you show up, like, right? That same kind of pride.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, look, to me, particularly the last couple of years, a lot of my role is bringing out the pride of who we are and what we are, both internally and externally. And like I said, we have a lot of work this year to grow from the challenges in terms of we did not meet our expectations on the field. So to me, there's no doubt we have to put our hand up and say, how are we going to get better? But at the same time, to do that, we also have to really embrace the qualities and the growth of the sport in the state, the growth of having, I think, for sure, the best stadium and the best fans in the league to push us. And so to me, the hunger and the pride have to come out in this project in terms of how do we recalibrate from not having a good year, and how do we create the expectation back to where we know and want, and it should be based on who we are, which is, a team that makes the playoffs and makes runs for MLS championships.
Awesome. Thanks, Manny. I'm super excited as a fan of Minnesota soccer to sort of see what that next iteration looks like. I know that you guys are all working hard behind the scenes, and Sherry says, same thing, tirelessly on trying to find the right person for the right fit for this club moving forward. I know you are as well. So I'm looking forward to it and seeing what that next iteration looks like, and being a part of it and being able to at least watch it. If I don't get to be at every game, I at least get to watch it in some way, shape, or form and be a part of it and be a part of this league. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Kyndra. And I just want to say thank you to the fans and to just the Minnesota soccer community. Like I said, I think on a personal level, I'm very excited personally and professionally for this new kind of challenge for me. And I'm excited. And I'm excited because I do believe, this club has given so much, but it needs to give more, and it needs to really recalibrate in terms of our goals are not to just kind of stand pat and have our fans, not expect to win and not expect us to grow and evolve and be competitive in a crazy competitive league and be proud of who we are. And like I said, ultimately, win some trophies because, there's no doubt, what we're doing here deserves that.
Agreed 100%. And I just want to say too, when people are like showing up every day and listening to the podcast or showing up at the stadium, showing up at events, supporting the community aspect, because I know Minnesota United and our community relations put out a call for action for lots of things, whether it's winter clothing items or canned foods or, packing this or doing that. Everybody shows up. And so I love that, it's been reciprocated in this community embraces you guys and the club embraces the community, and it'll just continue to evolve. And I'm excited about your role too, because I think you just get to put in all your qualities into different aspects, maybe some that haven't been utilized yet, especially on the business side. So I'm excited about that. So thank you for taking the time. We do have segment number 2. I'm going to make you stick around. Segment number 2. Right. I know here we're like wrapping it up, like we get to put a bow on it and you get to go back to work, but I'm going to keep you for segment number 2. Kevin Egan, my broadcast partner, is going to join us for segment number 2 to talk all things playoffs. But thanks again, everybody, for listening. Segment number 2 coming up, Sound of the Loons, presented by Allina Health. Looking for a way to get closer to your club? For just $25, Loons fans can join the Preserve, Minnesota United's official season ticket waitlist. Waiting usually isn't fun, but this waitlist comes with benefits. Being a member of the Preserve gives you early access to MNUFC single game tickets, partial season plans, and group tickets, as well as special pre-sales for other marquee events that come to Allianz Field. Visit MNUFC.com/preserve to join. All right, welcome back, everybody. Segment number 2 of Sound of the Loons. Once again, Manny Lagos joining me for the second segment, and we get to be joined by the other Renaissance man on this podcast. As we know, Manny's done about 75,000 different amazing roles within soccer. Now we get to be joined by the other one, Kevin Egan, who we all know as the broadcast partner. I don't want to call you my better half. I don't know which is which, but thanks for joining me, Kevin.
You're my better half on air. You are definitely my better half. Thank you.
I don't know. Everyone appreciates the accent that you bring, the flavor to the broadcast.
I appreciate it. Good to be with you guys, and you too, Manny.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
I joke about the accent because everyone always says you have a British accent, and we all know you're not British. So that's why I was taking it.
Canadians are all the same, Kyndra.
Yeah, it's all the same, right? Just like anybody north of like Missouri is all just Midwest. Like everyone lumps us in with Fargo, North Dakota, and even though we're not, right, Manny?
That's very important. We're not even the Midwest. We're the North. And we're very proud of it, though.
So yeah, anywho, we're gonna get talking about a little bit about MLS playoffs because they are like thick and fast. And then we have this like crazy break. But I want to sort of get your take, Manny. And Kevin and I have talked about this, whether it's been on air or off there. But the playoff format, we've talked to a lot of different people about that, including coaches, as Kevin and I have led into our series. We did the wild card game with San Jose and Sporting Kansas City. And then we also did the series, the best of 3 with New York Red Bulls and FC Cincinnati. What's your take on the playoff city series or the way it's laid out this year?
I really, really like it. Obviously, I get to be involved in a lot of kind of big league decision-making policy about how we're trying to build and grow. And one of the things I always start with to kind of tell audiences is the playoff space is a space that I love from the fact that as Americans, we do playoffs really well. And we should push our chest out and show and think about playoffs in a way that can create exciting things, because really that's what being an American sports fan is. And that's what a season is. It's a regular season and a playoff, and the great champions win both. And the champions of our win, somehow they get to the playoffs and they win a championship. So for me, that first element, I like the idea of us thinking about trying to put our chest out and say, hey, we do playoffs really well. I think this year in particular, a couple of things that I think the league is trying to solve. And they actually used some really good outside resources, did studies all over the world. And again, in some way, shape, or form, there's even kind of playoff scenarios, particularly in the promotion relegation and trying to get into Europa League and Champions League and even on the lower end. So sneakily, there's playoffs in other parts of the world too. But again, they're done different because there is promotion relegation. I think for us, the identity of trying to both expand the playoffs in a complicated time with the international breaks, along with, I think, the idea that every team in the league needs a home game, I think is a very important part of this. Again, you fight all year long for relevancy to make the playoffs. It's a huge accomplishment. And I think your fans should be rewarded the whole game. And this scenario kind of solved that. It kind of gave this first round an ability to both deal with the huge international break and also extend more games and specifically give a home game to every team that officially makes the playoffs. Obviously, we had the play-in game. And so for me, I love it. And then personally, I have the gray hair. I actually played in best of 3 series back in the day. And I loved them. They're awesome. They really are, particularly now with the penalty kicks really, resolving no kind of total goals, a playoff feel every game. And I'm sure you guys as announcers get to feel that energy that every game has been an output of excitement.
Yeah. And when you say, pump your chest out with the playoffs, Manny, I'm totally with you on that. For me, playoffs are so exciting. You look around different leagues around the world, whether it's in South America or over in Europe, and a lot of the time, you hear the mid-table, languishing in mid-table mediocrity, and teams really don't have an awful lot on the line. And for me, with sports, I love nothing more as a commentator than stakes. Stakes are everything. What's at stake in this game and why? And how are we going to sell this story? And when it comes to playoffs, it's so easy for Kyndra and I. Like we're talking all week long about this certain game that we're building up to, and there's stakes. And I think with the playoffs, the drama has been there for all to see. Last night was exceptional drama with Atlanta and Columbus, and it sets up an incredible match 3 this coming Sunday. Elsewhere, other teams getting it done in 2 games, the likes of Orlando, Cincinnati, showcasing their prowess. But I'm with you. I think it's wonderful. I really do hope, though, and this is where this may be a question back to you, Manny. Sorry, Kyndra, is that
oh, you're good.
as someone who's involved in these league discussions and that's played a role in this decision to go best of three, how do we get to a point with Major League Soccer where we get some consistency with our playoff format year in, year out, where fans can really identify what this is, and maybe it's easier to market, it's easier to get the word out there, and it's easier to build drama.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. I would say the goal would be obviously to build our brand and broaden the realities that, the playoffs come at a time when, sports are exploding in this country. You have American football, college and pro. You've got the Major League Baseball playoffs. You've got college basketball even starting up. So you have a lot of these elements where it's tough. I would say, though, that if you look at the other playoffs and the realities are, they also evolve to 3 to 5 series, or they change. The NBA has changed several iterations and also has a play-in game now, and an in-league tournament as well.
Yeah,
so it is tough. I think the goal is to just get there and maybe get a couple years of consistency. I still think it'll always evolve a little bit because, again, one of the unique things about playoffs is I think it can evolve. It can kind of be something different based on how many teams are in the league or based on, what the goals of where you're trying to do it. But ultimately, the one thing I would say is getting consistent would be great. Building our brand and the fans knowing when the games are would be great. It's a really tough time of the year to do it with the international break, just being completely honest.
Well, not only that, but just even, and people are still trying to sort through, when is my team playing? Some teams had 10 game breaks between game 1 and game 2, and some teams had 6 or 7 day breaks. And I don't know if some of that has to do with the facilities in which these games are being played. I mean, some of these teams are playing, in a football stadium, if it's the Revs, or, you just never know what goes into these discussions and how things shake out and what's available. But I think, to your point, Manny, about trying to figure out, that was a huge piece of Apple and MLS of having every game at 7:30 local time the entire year, was so people knew where to find the games. But then we also have the benefit now of every single night for like the next 8 days, there's a game, So, I mean, who doesn't love that, to be able to plop down on your couch every night and know that you're going to watch 1 to 2 MLS games, and now they're playoff games, which are meaningful. Was there any team that made it to the postseason that surprised either of you, East or West, that you just throughout the season maybe didn't see it happening, or they were in the wild card game and so there's always a chance? Was there any team in either conference for you guys that was kind of a shocker to get in, or not so much?
For me, Manny, I'll jump in. Maybe not a surprise that they got in, but a surprise now that they're very much in the conversation for MLS Cup. And it shouldn't be a surprise. And that's Seattle, because at times throughout the season, I didn't see it from Brian Schmetzer's team. There was some question marks about whether Rui Diaz and Ladero had kind of lost it a little bit. Jordan Morris picking up injuries, conceding goals, relying on real youthful centre backs like Reagan. I think they look really good now. And I know Dallas won the last one. I expect Seattle to get it done at home. And then you lean on, Manny, you've been there. Like, when you have that playoff experience and you understand the smell, the feel, the sensation involved in how to get the win, it counts for something. And that's a big question mark around Cincinnati right now, and that they've never done it. These players have never done it. None of them have at Cincinnati. So it's a fascinating dynamic, but I'd probably pick Seattle there, Kyndra.
Manny?
I just like the way you answered that, because I actually want to steer away from the West, because I think I'll be a little bit more emotional and bitter based on the realities of our season. But I would say hats off to St. Louis, an amazing year, amazing run. This is a reality of the playoffs too. It is a combination of the regular season and postseason, which is tough, and experience helps. So I think the team that I really, is impressed with, and it impressed me last night. I was almost sure Nashville was going to take it to 3 games, and Orlando not only won last night, but they handled the street fight really well, like really, really well. And for me, they've probably been my biggest surprise in the East in terms of just how well they've looked and how well it seems like they're equipped to make a run in the playoffs now. They seem very deep in a lot of positions, and they seem like they've got a lot of hungry guys that come into games if their level needs to be picked up a little bit. So that's probably the number one team for me right now that I've been impressed with, based on the fact that it's easy to say Cincinnati, but like I said, it'll be interesting to see their run. And then the Phillies of the world, they've been good for years, year in and year out.
Well, based on that too, real quick, I mean, I feel like we've had these discussions that Orlando has been like the number 2 that's flown under the radar. I mean, I feel like no one was talking about them in the East, but they've been consistently at or near the top of the Eastern Conference just behind, whether it's been Cincinnati or, Philadelphia was floating in and out. I feel like nobody was talking about them all year, but they've kind of been good and been flying under the radar.
They finished 7 points ahead of St. Louis, top of the West, Orlando. And now we've got this strange one where only Atlanta, remaining on the eastern side of things, wouldn't host against the top side from the Western Conference. So when you look at the Supporter Shield standings, Cincinnati, Orlando, Columbus, St. Louis, Philadelphia, New England, and then you've got Seattle in 7th place. So, I mean, it would take something special for a Western Conference team to be hosting at this point when it comes to MLS Cup.
Now, when you look at the teams that have clinched and moved on and gotten it done in 2 games, let's say, to move on to that next round, and now they've got quite a bit of a layoff here. Anybody that surprised you in that? I mean, we did the Kansas City San Jose wildcard game, and I felt like Kansas City is nearly unstoppable in this moment. Does it take anything away from St. Louis and the city they had, the season they had, getting bounced after 2 games? And then any other teams, Vancouver not finding a way, although that was kind of a crazy ending to that game. Anything for you, Manny, of the teams that have been pushed aside into that surprises you?
I think that's part of what the playoffs are is people show up. Again, I'm surprised about Nashville. I'm going to stick to the East. Like I said, I'm a little bit too emotional about the West anyway. So, but I think the Nashville last night's game, and probably this is a question back to you guys. It was a street fight, but I was so surprised at how well handled Orlando handled Nashville away. And I think there's probably been some questions about Orlando playing away all year, whether they could do what they did at home away. That one for me was probably I was really surprised that Nashville went out with a Peter based on how they navigated the season, the Leagues Cup. And I just thought they were going to be really good. Good at home. Sorry. The question I have for you guys is, the playoffs aren't always the best quality soccer, and you guys are announcers and you're calling games. And how do you guys navigate that sentiment on that? Sometimes it is a street fight. And again, I think sometimes people look at some of our MLS games in the playoffs, and I think it's hard because the quality isn't always there, because it is going to be based on trying to get a result that day. And it's why, as a former player, I love them. The physicality, the tension, the reality that the games aren't going to be always pretty. As announcers, how do you guys navigate that? And do you get a sense of that too, as announcers, that there's a shift?
Go for it, Kev.
My simple answer, I'll go back to what I said about stakes, Manny. For us, I think it's really important for us as storytellers, which we are, to understand what the stakes are. And if a game is a street fight, tell the story of why it's a street fight. Sure. Maybe that's the players' contracts are nearly up and they're playing for their careers. Maybe it's that a franchise has never won MLS Cup, and this is what it's going to take to get over the line. Maybe they were bullied aside last year in a playoff game, and their coaches learned from that. And this is something that's been a narrative during the week. So you have a Cartagena in midfield, you have an Araujo in midfield, you have a Janssen at the back that are just street fighters, as you mentioned, that are ready to go into battle. And when you set that up as a storyline at the beginning and it plays out that way, we talk about this all the time with myself and Kyndra, because we could set up a game and then the game could offer something completely different, and sure. It's up to us to pivot in the moment and then tell the story of the game as opposed to narrative going into the game. But I think ultimately what it comes back to for us, Kyndra, I don't know if you agree with me on this, is stakes. And if the game plays out and you can understand that street fight nature of it, maybe it's not the prettiest soccer in the world, but it doesn't matter because there's so much on the line.
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day, you just have to win the game. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And even if it's a best of 3 series, and, I felt kind of odd in that last game that we did with Red Bull Cincinnati, because we're going into this moment thinking there's no real pressure on Cincinnati at that moment, right? They had already taken care of business at home. They've had this amazing home crowd. So if they didn't get a result, there's no real pressure. Where they like to take care of it on the road and maybe have a little bit more of a layoff and just know that they did it and they got it done and they're getting, gaining confidence. But there was no real pressure that moment. The pressure, it was desperate. That was Pat Noonan said to us, I got to see how Red Bulls are going to come out. We know how Red Bulls like to play, but now they're going to be desperate because they need a win at home. So it might shift a little bit the way they press or where they press or how they play the game. So as we do these coaches calls and these things in the middle of the game or in the middle of the week, I think it sets up sort of how we want to set up the game. But to Kevin's point, once the game starts, you really never know. I love the nature of the playoffs. And I didn't feel like because it was a best of 3 that there wasn't any pressure on a game 1. I didn't feel that way. I felt like, you know, John Tolkien had some comments after the first one. It doesn't matter if you lose 2-0, you lose 8-0. But to me, then you go for it. Like that actually makes the game 1 more exciting, because what do you have to lose? You know, you have a game 2, you know? So I don't know. I love it.
Go ahead, sorry.
I totally disagree with John Tolkien. Sorry on that. Totally disagree, because momentum counts for something. You know, if you go and you get thumped 8-0, you telling me that doesn't affect the group midweek, man? You know, of course it does, right?
I just think the reality too, it shifted the best of 3 now. There is some pressure, like St. Louis felt, on that first game now. You know, you did have the better run in the regular season. You are the higher seed. It is a best of 3, but the first game's at home. In the past was just, you know, Kansas City would have won that series right away. There was some pressure now that went into the momentum for the second game. So to me, I really like that dynamic of the first playoff seed in best of 3. I think it's still somewhat gives a little bit more advantage to the lower seed, but not a lot. And now the rest of the way, the higher seeds really do get their home field advantage throughout the playoffs.
And think about that for a second. All the criticisms on you look at social media, radio shows, podcasts are about the regular season. It diminishes the value, right, of the 34-game regular season. It's rubbish, in my opinion, because look at Cincinnati now. Cincinnati go and they could have lost that game on the road against the Red Bulls and still wrapped it up at home. Every game's a TQL now. Like, you're telling me that 24,000, you know, raucous crowd at TQL Stadium isn't a massive advantage for Atlanta United, say, to miss out on the top 4, New England to miss out on the top 4, and now New England have to go to Philly twice if they can win tonight. You know, it's a huge advantage to get home field advantage. You can see it with Atlanta United last night. And Kyndra, quickly back to your point about pressure and how things can change. I look at Columbus now. After the first win, they completely dominate Atlanta United. They play them off the park. But last night, Atlanta United, with their Gala 11, Thiago Almada back in the team, they revert back to a 4-2-3-1, and they destroy Columbus, right? Columbus get a consolation goal at the very end, but Atlanta play them off the park. How the mindset of Columbus has potentially switched now ahead of Sunday, or the feeling in Atlanta has switched. This is why I love this best of 3.
Yeah, I agree. I love that part of it. I'd also just say, oh my gosh, this is horrible interview.
It's like you've been talking. It's like you've been talking a lot or doing a lot of work or something.
I know.
So it's like something is happening, you know, like you've been busy.
No, I think the other element for somebody that lives in it, the regular season, to me, my favorite thing about it is that it forces teams to get better from the beginning of the season to the end. It forces you to make sure you're both individually and collectively have a group that starts in the beginning of the year. And by the end of the year, if you want to make a run in the playoffs, you have to be a better group and you have to be playing better to make a run. And that's a little bit different than in Europe, where there's some of the league itself, you can peter to the finish line and win. And that's great. I just know for us here, you know, behind the scenes look, we have to think about how individually, collectively, we're building a group that is going to be better by the end of the year and ready in position to make a playoff run. And I think that's a different element, but I really enjoy that, which makes every game and every moment in the regular season really important. It's important whether you win or lose, because you have to learn from it to build the group to get better by the end of the year.
Well, and then what to that point is, you know, there's always this debate about supporter shield versus winning it all, right? And like, you know, the supporter shield winners is the best over time in their consistency, but then now they have to still continue to be consistent if you want to win a best of 3 series to get past that first round, where it's not just a one-off where, you know, there's pressure on one team on one given night. And I mean, that's the tricky thing to me about soccer too, and why I like the best of 3 maybe versus the one-off, at least in that first round, is because, like, I think the soccer is one of those sports that one thing can go against you in some fluke moment, like a handball and a penalty, and you weren't the better the team on the night. I don't know if it's a plus or a minus that then you have an opportunity in a best of 3 series to redeem a situation or a call or something that could go against you. That's like a fluke nature against the run of play. You know? My only challenge
with this supporter shield, and I love it, and it's a great trophy. Should be an honorable trophy. I'm a big believer in the integrity of the competition, and not everybody plays everybody equally, and there's no real way to say that total points is fair comparatively, because we have such a big league now. We have over 30 teams. So to me, it's hard to say that's as I think it's a big deal. I don't think it's as big a deal as somebody who wins both the regular season and the playoffs. That to me is the American champion in sports and our sports culture. And I gravitate towards that more than the Supporter Shield.
Do you think playoffs, guys, is more about, leaning on the stars and this is the time that they have to shine? You can put them on your back, or is it more like this is an opportunity for guys that maybe aren't normally in the spotlight to step up, or a combination of the two?
Both. It's got to be both, right? Like, I think last year, look at MLS Cup, John McCarthy. Who had John McCarthy as the hero at MLS Cup, and he comes into the game and he produces wonders late on, and obviously in the penalty shootout as well. It's got to be both. But I do think it's important to have those stars. I do think it's important when you look at Cincinnati and Lucho Acosta and the icon that he's become in Cincinnati since joining, and how important he is for this group. But then on the flip side, you could say, well, Ian Murphy, with the suspension out to Matt Miazga and Nick Hagland out injured, a draft pick from Duke is as important in a crucial moment like this.
I love that we got a shout out to Duke. That's where my son goes to school now. So I'm glad. Let's keep that going.
And play soccer.
Yeah. By the way, a lot of good Duke players in the league right now. A lot of good Duke players in the league. So
who do you guys see for what do you guys think of the awards so far? I know not all the awards have been announced, and like we're gonna kind of get off the playoff path because it's all being sort of lumped together. But I know Yakimaki's won, newcomer Thiago Almada, young player. Like, what do you guys think about the awards? Do you think there's value in them, and maybe like who do you see going forward? I know we've sort of discussed who we've picked prior. I don't know how you feel about it, Manny.
I mean, I love the awards. I think they're appropriate. I think based on peers and you guys as journalists, all the voting, however it is, and the fans, to me, it's a great acknowledgement to these individual players that have had amazing years and deserve it. So I think I'm a big fan of them. So
have we given out Coach of the Year yet? I don't think so.
I haven't seen it.
That for me is and this is where Kyndra and I were chatting about it, Manny, that if
we've had a few debates about this sitting around tables prior to games, when we had one with the Spanish guys with Marcelo, and like about if it was Bradley Carnell. But that's the thing, the voting doesn't count the playoffs, right? So like, does it change if you were like Bradley Carnell or Pat Noonan, or I don't know, who would get your vote?
I think it has to count the playoffs though.
But it doesn't.
Come on, it should though, right?
But it doesn't.
It absolutely should. You're coaching in that pressure cauldron, where of the playoffs and knockout soccer. It should count. And I've said this we were chatting, Kyndra and I, Manny, saying that if our game was on par with the NFL and we were having these debates on a First Take and all these ESPN and Fox Sports shows,
sure,
it would be an incredible debate right now, whether it's Bradley Carnell or Pat Noonan. Which side of the fence 100%. Are you? And get off the fence, Manny.
I won't be able to get off the fence because there's a real world in my world of opinions. But like I think they're both amazing. I mean, what great stories! Like let's be honest. Like it's really, to your point, both are unbelievable stories, unbelievable years. It honestly, you think about Cincinnati's journey and how dominant they were based on some tough years, and then you just think about the entry of St. Louis and. I personally love that story because I do think St. Louis is ironically the most important historical soccer city over a scope of 100 years in this country. And I feel like they've embraced that identity and really just hit the ground running MLS really well. So both of those guys deserve this, what they're doing.
Yeah. Totally.
So if we were to skip ahead, we're not going to go through every single series and who remains and who's going to step out. But if you guys had to pick an MLS Cup final based on who's in and around it right now, who would you pick for an MLS Cup final and possibly to win it all? And how does the international break, and this is kind of a side, but with this big, massive international break in the middle, who does that maybe benefit, or is that a detriment, or is that just, we just got to deal with it because that's the way it is?
My view would be to hope teams looked at New England last year and saw, this the chunkiness of the long break, and they're thinking about how to like either give guys times off and build up for these games now. I think the nice thing is that the freshness of the players it's nice for me to know that the players are fresh going to these games. I think there'd been some times where we tried to get a bunch of games in before the national break and we had like 2 or 3 days rest. I do like how all these games have been, I think, a bit of a minimum of 5 days rest. So to me, it's been enjoyable, at least knowing that scenario is not there, where all the guys on the field are fresh. Have they looked fresh and played fresh? That might be a different story, but so I like the fact that side of the break that's there. So then now it's up to the clubs and the coaches and technical staff to build a plan of make sure the guys are sharp and ready to go. It does become complicated with guys who are going to go off and get load minutes in a different model than the guys who are in their club environments here in the US. So to me, it's an incredible challenge, for the teams to deal with. Like I said, the international break is a really big challenge for just the vibe of MLS playoffs, the flow. It definitely gets interrupted. Whether it's the competitive world for me in terms of trying to keep a staff and everybody engaged in that flow of trying to make a playoff run, or I just think from a league branding side, to your guys' point, it does really hit some tough marketing issues in terms of keeping people engaged in the playoff story. So not easy this global sport sometimes to overcome those challenges.
And there's a lot of individual stories throughout the international break too that are very challenging for coaches. You think about Gadi Kyndra representing Israel now, and he has to play 4 games in 10 days on the international break because of everything going on, obviously, which is such a challenge. But back to your original question, Kyndra, I'm going to go with a Cincinnati hosting LAFC final, and Cincinnati trying to take down the champions at TQL would be a marvelous setup for the final, I think.
What do you got, Manny?
I think on paper it looks like LAFC, and I'm going to go probably with Orlando or Philly. Let's go with the rematch. Let's go Philly at home now to go against LAFC. Just that's a good storyline for the press there.
Also, I really hope we get Manny. I really hope we get Columbus at Cincinnati in the final. Hell is real. High stakes would be incredible.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think LAFC is not going to find a way through. I don't know why. I just have like this weird gut feeling. I would love to say that, Houston's going to find a way with Ben Olsen and what he's been able to do. But ultimately, I don't know why, but I'm going to say this is some freak thing where Sporting Kansas City finds a way to get into the final. And I think it's going to be against Cincinnati. And so you still have that sort of like logistical regional, competition where they're not like, I feel like, everyone wants to say it's regional, like rivalries are based on proximity, but I kind of feel like it's more about the energy and the vibe between the competitions. Like we saw.
Spoken like a real Minnesotan, Kyndra, because we'll never have rivals. I mean, that's like, I love how we don't need to justify, Kyndra. We'll never have rivalries. It's our one weak spot in Minnesota. So
I agree. But I again, though, like people try to force the issue like based on proximity. And I just don't think that's the way it works. Yes, Columbus and Cincinnati, that's like sort of a natural fit. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's based on the competition and how they play and what happens on the field.
Again, I don't know if you know this, but this is our weak spot. We are in an island. Rivalries it doesn't matter what sport. The Vikings we say the Packers are a rivalry. The Packers would say the Bears. So it doesn't matter the sport. We don't have rivals in Minnesota, whether it's proximity or it's a weird one for us, so nobody would say we're their rival in our sports world, which is, tough for us to take sometimes.
So then did I totally miss that? So you said Philly's going to end up winning, correct, Manny? Like in the final? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Kev, you said.
I'm going back and forth because I like the ideal final for me would be Cincinnati, being rewarded for everything they've accomplished, and Pat Noonan going on to lift MLS Cup as coach against LAFC. However, I do think that if Columbus get past Atlanta, Columbus could be the team to derail Cincinnati at home. And that would be gut-wrenching. I mean, that would be so difficult to take for Cincinnati. And honestly, a big question mark right now with Haglund out for so long and out for the season is Miazga, and getting Matt Miazga back on the field, because with the system that they play, does Pat Noonan now have to alter things and go to 2 centre-backs with 2 really young centre-backs in Ian Murphy and Yersa Mosquera? I'm not sure. Miazga's a massive loss for this conference semi-final, potentially.
They better hope he doesn't miss another. I mean, I'm hoping that with this, be resolved and he doesn't miss another game based on sort of more information that seems to be coming out. But it was kind of a silly move on his part. So, but anyways, I know you both have busy schedules, so thank you for taking the time. We're going to wrap it up. I mean, the beauty of it is as playoffs, you never know what's going to happen. That's why we play the games. I know I say it several times, and we'll be tuning in. I don't even know who is playing tonight. I can't even keep track. Okay, there we go. I just know that I'll have it on and I'll be watching. So I appreciate you guys taking the time, joining me for another episode of Sound of the Loons. And I'm sure we'll catch up maybe next week or maybe after the international break. We'll have to see when we catch up to keep track of what's going on with everything MLS. So thank you both for taking the time.
Thank you, Kyndra.
All right, have a good day, everybody. Talk to you guys next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Sound of the Loons. Just a heads up, this episode was recorded on the morning of Wednesday, November 8th, before the official news broke of the new hiring of the chief soccer officer for Minnesota United. We will have more on that new hiring and what that means for the club in the next episode of Sound of the Loons, presented by Allina Health.